Australia is a stunningly beautiful country. I'm standing on a small meteorite escarpment. A meteor came a few million years ago, mind you, down in that direction, smashing into the earth here, and pushed up the escarpment where I'm standing, looking over this magnificent and beautiful terrain. Over my shoulder here is the Cockburn Range. Like a lot of parts of Australia, it's very old. It's 1.8 billion years old, the rock. If you look closely though, there are two levels. Uplift caused before Gondwana land was created. The bottom uplift is a relatively new one, about 100 million years old, and the top uplift is about 200 million years old. Sunset in the Kimberley. This little river crossing is not one you want to stop at because there are crocodiles in this river. Fire is a natural part of the Australian environment. This is a natural fire. Many trees and plant life in Australia have evolved that their seeds will only burst open with fire. So fire is not only normal, it's necessary for the reproduction of many species of plants and trees. The other thing that's interesting is during fires, the kites, the predatory birds look for the worms and the lizards and things that are fleeing. And they've evolved to the point that they will even pick up a smouldering branch and carry it across the road to the other side to extend the fire. It's been seen that these birds are smart enough to figure out that you need to help the fire jump the road, because if the fire gets bigger, there are more worms and more lizards. The Australian baobab tree, much like its African cousin, it can live to 800 or 1,000 years old. During the wet season, it absorbs a lot of water and expands with its corky interior. And then during the dry season, it'll shrink back as it uses that water, much like a camel's hump. And speaking of baobab trees, some of them can be really, really big, like this one, which, as you can see, is hollowed out on the inside because it was once used as a prison. Not a pretty place. Used both for Indigenous and non-Indigenous prisoners back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Spread along this rock face here, just outside Wyndham, are a lot of examples of Indigenous rock art, and this is the sort of place where you find it, in an overhang where the face is painted on by the ochre, would be protected from the weather. And you can see this is a beautiful wall, and along here are lots of examples of hand stencils and stick figures and things like this. A lot of these paintings are old and mystical and tell a story. I just don't know what it is. Wow. These pictures, they represent their myths, their stories, their beliefs, the things they passed on. Every piece of this knowledge that's lost is lost to us all. When you see stencils like this one, the hand was placed, the ochre was sprayed over the top. That handprint represents the print of a real person. Who was he or her? What did they do? What was their life about? What made them happy? What made them sad? All these things, all these different hand stencils, some old, some young, all represent people. People who once roamed this great place. I'd like to be able to tell you what it's about, and I'd like to be able to tell you how old it is, but I can't. No matter how hard I've tried, I've not been able to get any information on this. And it brings me to a point that's slightly controversial. I believe it's very difficult to protect, preserve and love something you don't know about. And we need to preserve, protect and love in all the different indigenous cultures that exist in Australia. But there's a twin obligation that comes with that. There's an obligation for non-Indigenous to learn, but there's also an obligation for Indigenous to teach. Some do it better than others, both the non-Indigenous and the Indigenous. Some agree with me and some don't. And I suppose that is one of the many ongoing challenges between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous worlds in Australia is, do we or don't we walk forward together as one? G'day! Airport in far northwestern Australia. Welcome to the Bungle Bungles, or otherwise known as the Purnululu National Park. One of the most amazing parts of Australia, only becoming well known in 1983. Before that it was a secret known only to the Indigenous tribes and peoples of this land and a couple of helicopter pilots. Along with the Great Barrier Reef and Uluru, it's one of the most amazing World Heritage areas, natural heritage in Australia. You know, the geologists don't entirely agree about how all of this was formed, but here goes one of the stories. About 300 million years ago, there are a couple of major geological lifts. This used to be a sea floor in a very shallow inland sea, and it lifted up. And a series of lakes and river systems formed, depositing a mix of fine silt and thicker rock. And when you look closely at the bungles, you see layers of orange and black. About 150 million years ago, though, this started to erode, forming gullies through all of the streams and creeks, leaving these kind of honeycomb or bee's nest type shapes you see all around. The entire Bungle Bungles is made out of white sandstone. White. The orange and the black lines come from two different things. The finer sediment stone holds water better during the wet season, and therefore an algae grows on the outside, a cyanobacteria, otherwise known as blue-green algae. And that creates the black colour in the finer stone. The heavier stone leaches a little bit more ferrous oxide or iron ore or rust, and that creates the orange colour. But it's only about 5 millimetres thick, both the orange and the black, and if you scrape underneath that, you get the white sandstone that all of these massifs are made out of. You can see here how the ferrous oxide creates a protective layer, and if you lose that, then it erodes a lot deeper, a lot faster, and in fact can push all the way through and become a bit of a window. What you see through a lot of Australia are these termite mounds. This one's an old one. You can see it's hollowed out in the middle here. This one's been evacuated. The queen must have died. But when they build them with all these channels and tunnels and little places where the air can get in and get out. And these can be up to 15 degrees cooler inside than they are outside by the way the ducting is built. It's a lot of effort. These are built with the secretions of the termites themselves from the moisture and from the resin they get from the spinifex grass. Now, termites don't deal very well with ultraviolet light, so they spend a lot of time inside, but they still need to go out, particularly at night, to get the spinifex grass and things like that. So it's alright if you live here in a mound down on the ground, but what happens if during the breeding the queen and the king were caught by an updraft and blown up onto a rock face? What do termites do then? Then you've got to build a path down from your nest all the way down to the ground. That's a lot of work. So you can see here is this path coming down from the nest up above, coming down towards the ground where the workers can get their work done. Some of these paths go 200 metres. So when you see a nest up on the cliff and you see this poor little path coming all the way down, the average life expectancy of a little termite and his little eggs is about 15 years. 15 years up and down those paths, day and night. Not good. All the glistening bits on the spinifex that you see shining in the sun are all bits of resin, and that's the natural resin in the spinifex that's used by both the termites to build their nest, but also the indigenous people to waterproof their spears to make sure the spears stay straight even if they get wet. This area is known as the cathedral. Imagine what it's like in the wet season when this is cascading down a huge waterfall into this pond. And just listen to the place. Oh, when you got a dickhead doing that. Just under the overhang here, you got a couple of examples of the Kidja people rock art over here. Stencil of the boomerang here. Another one up there, and you can just make out a hand here. They're not very old though. You know they're not very old because the pigments aren't particularly resilient pigments, but more importantly this rock face is not a particularly resilient rock face given that it's sandstone and subject to a lot of weather. How old? Pre-European settlement maybe, but probably not. Yeah, Australia really is a spectacularly beautiful country. Right, look. Place called Questro Gorge. Just showing you that not all of Central Australia is barren desert. There's some beautiful rainforest around. And Marsha Langton, you're right. Questro is magnificent. Mate, at times this feels like a movie set. Stunning. Sometimes you have to kick yourself to remember how beautiful this country is. I'm in a place called Amalia Gorge. Take a look. Another one of these remote, beautiful Australian swimming holes. This time it's Amalia Gorge after a couple hours hike. Absolutely magnificent. Good time for a swim. The sign says there could be some freshwater crocodiles here, but that's okay because only the salties kill people. Cool in another one of these remote, wonderful Australian places to swim. Gorge. Another waterfall and another swimming hole. Through some more lush jungle, heading towards Zebedee Springs. A hot thermal springs to relax those aching muscles. This walk up to Zebedee Springs shows you one thing about the Australian bush. See the black on the sides of the trees? It shows that recently there's been a fire here, but look at the lush undergrowth or the regrowth to show you how fast the Australian bush does recover and need fire. From charcoal like this to regrowth like that. You know, the water here in Zebedee Springs is between 28 and 30 degrees Celsius all year round, heated from a thermal vent deep underground. I certainly hope there are no crocs here. Oh, are there many better places in the world to swim?